Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the third in a four-part series of leadership webinars offered by Alumni Engagement at Memorial University. This series would not have been possible without our partnership with the Gardner Center and the support of the Conference and Event Services team at Memorial's Emera Innovation Exchange. Before we get things underway, I just want to take a brief moment to thank you for taking the time to connect with us online today. Life has gotten a tad more challenging, and we're all affected differently. But here we are today, a family of alumni and friends, sharing in the desire to connect, learn, and grow with the challenges we're all facing. So I just wanted to say thank you for all that you're going through and for joining us today. We are lucky to have Heather Peters with us to discuss leading and engaging teams virtually. Heather is an experienced leadership coach, consultant, and facilitator working with individuals, teams, and organizations to drive productivity, engagement, and organizational results. She is an instructor with the Gardner Center, runs her own practice, Impact Coaching and Consulting, and is an associate with Knightsbridge Robson Surrett, the largest HR firm in Atlantic Canada. Heather has her Master in Employment Relations from Memorial, a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Ottawa, is an accredited coach with the International Coach Federation, and is an advanced certified HR professional with IPMA Canada. And she's wonderful. Today, we'll be continuing to test this new online platform and its many features. So I'll ask for your patience ahead of time if we get any glitches, but John is taking care of us in the background, and he's fantastic. At the end of the event, we'll also be sharing a couple of live audience polls during the presentation, so please be ready for those. At the end of the event, we'll also have an audience poll to gather your thoughts and feedback on the event itself, as well as any ideas that you may have on future webinar topics that you'd like us to cover. This event will be recorded and available to everyone in the days following the event. Heather will present for 20 minutes, give or take, followed by a 20-minute Q&A period. To ensure that I get your questions, and this is important, please, I ask you to only use the Q&A function on the right of this window. It might be minimized, so you may have to click that little arrow before Q&A to have it expand. But to ensure that I get your questions, I ask that you only use the Q&A function. Please don't use the chat, and please don't send the questions to John in the background or Ms. Peters, just so that I can get them and get them answered properly. You can send those questions publicly or to me privately in the Q&A. And also, you're welcome to type your questions at any time during the presentation in the Q&A window, and I'll read them once Heather is finished. Heather, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'll hand it over to you.
All righty, let's see what I can get up here. All right, I think you can see. I'm just going to fix my technology, which I'm not good at, so just give me a second. I think I'm good. Any problems? I'm sure Justin, I'd love having Justin and John there. It makes my life so much easier. So I'm so pleased to have you folks online today. If it's at all, anyone in Newfoundland or wherever you are, it's a gorgeous day. So I'm hoping you can see some value in what we're going to present today. With regard to leading and engaging teams virtually, it's something I've sort of talked to clients about, I've experienced myself, and I've seen the pros and the cons. I actually, when I first started in the HR space, I worked my way up to a regional position in HR, and it was on a global team. And so the challenge is that I was in Atlantic Canada, and I had a colleague out in BC, but everyone else was in Toronto. It was one of those things where you'd call in and you'd have a whole host of people in Toronto, 10 or 15 in a call, and we'd be sort of dialing in or videoing in, and it was never quite the same. We certainly didn't feel as connected. It wasn't sort of as common years ago as it is today working virtually, but it certainly had a sense of a bit of disengagement, not knowing what's happening, not feeling part of the team. So that was sort of we evolved, and it did get better, but it was certainly not a fabulous experience. Secondly, though, then I went on and did an Eastern Canadian role. And with that role, I was a small team of three. So I was doing Eastern Canada, someone else was doing Western, and we had our boss in Toronto who was doing global. And we were this nice little knit team. So it was smaller than sort of the 20-odd person team, so it was easier, and we were all working virtually. So there's sometimes these hybrids we work with. There's sometimes we're all working virtually or remotely, like some of us are today, but it changes the way it feels. And I think that's what it is with virtually working, is how does it make you feel when you're connecting? So, all right, let's move on. Let's make sure I can get my technology working here. One second. Okay, I'm not working super well, so just give me a second. There we go. Okay, so when I'm working with clients every day, I'm hearing lots of different things. So with COVID, we jumped into this crazy new world of ours, and here are some of the things I'm hearing on a frequent basis, some of the themes I'm hearing. I can't get a hold of people and I can't meet my deadlines. Accountability is a huge issue. People getting slowed down, projects putting on hold, and it can cause a great deal of stress. The other element, though, I'm also hearing in a positive light is we feel more connected than ever before. I didn't know that so-and-so had 2 kids, and I didn't know this person had a dog, and they're seeing real people. They're seeing this sort of authentic side of all of us, so there's a lot of positives there as well. I can't get as much done, but the work keeps coming. Some of us are overwhelmed during the day. Some of us are thinking, oh, it's the same as it was before, and the things are just ongoing. So it can be causing a lot of stress. And the other major element is I know what is happening. I don't know what's happening. I'm nervous. What's going on in our world? What's happening in my company? What is it going to look like after the fact? So everyone's feeling differently, seeing differently, and thinking differently around their future and what it is currently. So I want to hear what you guys are thinking. So John, if you have a second to show us, hopefully I can see it on my end as well, the poll results that you had up before the session, that would be excellent.
All right. It's giving us 15 seconds for any participants to finish responding.
There we go. Take a second, everyone, and hit the button.
And here come the results.
Excellent. All right. Oh my goodness. So we've got, it's kind of all over, which is kind of why I picked those things. So we're sort of seeing pretty well even across the board. And of course, some people had all of the above. And that's kind of what I'm hearing too. So it's kind of very similar to what I'm seeing and hearing out in the world of work. So we're all coming up with different unique challenges. And I'm hoping today that I can walk through some things. Maybe there's a tip, a new perspective that you can have in terms of what you can do. Some of you are leaders, maybe some of you are soon to be leaders or hopeful leaders. So hopefully you'll find some good tips and tricks and ways to think about how to work virtually. What is a virtual team? Okay, here's the definition. So a group of geographically or organizationally dispersed employees working together using electronic communication technology to accomplish necessary work tasks and objectives. The thing, I mean, this sort of type of definition has been around a long time, but I think the one way to think about it is, what does it mean to be geographically or organizationally dispersed? So a company I worked with had, I think it was 7 or 8 floors in a Montreal office building. People who worked on the 3rd floor and the 7th floor arguably would be virtual teams. They rarely saw each other. They might possibly have run into each other in the elevator, but that's about it. 90% of their work was done virtually. So when I was pushing remote teams in this one company, I said, what is a remote team? They had to really start thinking about, just because we're in the same building doesn't mean, we're an actual intact, like in-person team. We're not. So how does that look in your world? And have you been actually working more virtually than you actually know? Now, we were thrust into this crazy new world of ours. What does it look like? When I spoke with people before and clients of mine around how do you actually create, successful virtual or remote teams or remote workers, there were standards, there were processes and policies, there was technology, and all that was set up in advance. It was planned. There was often agreements set up with employees. I mean, we did not have that luxury. All the leadership now around the world that wasn't doing that on a regular basis is kind of thrust into the deep end. So it's been a hard go, right? The variation is we are not virtually working, like we are not set up as virtual teams, majority of us. We are actually, you are not working from home, you are at your home during a crisis trying to work. So it's a very big difference. Now, I would argue though that this may go on a little bit longer than we think, and it could certainly, if we have a second wave with COVID, it could happen again. So again, understanding what the difference is really significant. So if you look at what the now normal is, whether the new normal in a few months might look different, we've got kids at home, we've got all these things happening. My brother's on the right-hand side there in his little jury-rigged setup that his son put together for him. So it's one of those things that you sort of look at and go, what is it now? What does it look like? Not to be judgmental of people too. Everyone has a different situation. They have kids home, they have pets, they have seniors, maybe they're taking care of in their house. So it's a different normal. So what are the benefits? Every time there's change, I always say to a client or a colleague, or whoever I'm working with, okay, this is horrible. We've got our head wrapped around it now. We're doing the best we can. What's the opportunity? So what are the benefits? What are the things that we could look at strategically for our organizations and our teams that could be helpful? So we're going to do another poll, and I want to see what you guys think. So there's a poll there on your right-hand side. I want you to pick all that actually you think could be benefits. Okay, so pick all of the above that seem to work for you. And we'll give you, say, not a lot, maybe 20 seconds or so. I'm trying to stick with my 20 minutes. And we'll see where it goes. We're not going to stick to the 5 minutes there. I'll give you a minute to think it through. All right, so hopefully you can all be done there and hit submit, which would be brilliant. And I'll get John maybe in a couple seconds if he can see how it's going. Let us know if there's enough there to close it out.
Yeah, we've got a couple still in progress.
Okay.
I think 5, 4. I'm going to close it so we get that time limit. 20 seconds left. Yeah.
All right, and while John's finishing that up, I think you have to look at it as strategically, you know, what can this be for us? What can it be at the other side of this? No matter what our future holds, what can we see as not just a negative, but as a positive? And what does that mean in our organizations? You done?
Yeah, here we go.
All right, let's have a look. Ah, there we go. We have a job. Yes, that's always a good thing. Stations, travel time. Wonderful. They're kind of all over, and excellent. So again, flexibility with family, increased job satisfaction. It's incredible how much of a difference it makes. When you actually look at research, I got to look my numbers up here because I'm not the best at remembering them. Like for example, there was a 2-year study at Stanford talking about the benefits, talking about, virtual workers and what does it look like in terms of engagement. And they were more productive, 13% more productive than their office-based counterparts, 9% more engaged in their jobs, and 50% less likely to quit. There are advantages. And in Canada now, we had about 10% of workers were working remotely. And now, since COVID, it's been around 40%. So how can we see this as a positive, and what would it look like? So as leaders, so I assume many of you are leaders, you have teams, or you're aspiring to be a leader. The connection is that the leader makes a huge difference. There's lots of research around what impacts engagement, but it's predominantly still the leader that they report to, senior leaders as well. But what does it actually look like? So when you look at the research for over 20 odd years, it's very clear. Productivity increases, customer satisfaction, and profit, to the point of, just from a stats perspective, if anybody's interested, if you look at a top quartile of top 500 companies and you look at the lower quartile, the difference can be significant when you compare the two. So the top quartile, or the best engaged workers in companies with engaged workers, can have increases of productivity can go up 21%, profit can go up 22%. If safety is an issue in your industry, safety incidents can go down 48%. Turnover can be 25 to 65%, depending on the industry. It can be extraordinary. So you make a huge difference. No pressure, but you make a huge difference. So this is a time in our, evolution in terms of what we're going through right now, in terms of looking at ourselves. I'm seeing leaders that are stepping up, and I'm seeing leaders that are stepping back. And I've seen a lot of people surprised to see that. So you guys get to choose what you want to be. You guys get to choose, are you going to be the leader that steps back and actually probably lets the team flail around and not figure things out and feel like they're not cared for, they're not supported. That unforgivable leader, we've all had them. Every single one of us has had an unforgivable leader of some sort, whether it's work or volunteer activities. The forgettable one, didn't really make the mark. It was okay, we got through. And then the remarkable leader that stays with us for the rest of our lives, that we think about as a mentor almost in our head. So which one do you want to be? And so the rest of the session, I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks and strategies you can do within our virtual world, hopefully to make you more remarkable. So what is employee engagement? So this is sort of pseudo my definition, but it plays into a lot of the research out there. So your satisfaction with, involvement in, and commitment to your organization. What makes you go the extra mile? So if you think about 4 employees on your team, statistically, on average, you'll find one that's super engaged, the one you always go to, you're more likely to give work to, right or wrong. You've got 2 that are maybe, on the edge of a little bit more engaged or just a little bit less. And then often there's someone who actually is quite disengaged on a team on average. The impact, though, if you think about increasing productivity, 21%. Just putting an effort into increasing your engagement level can make that happen. And that could make you a remarkable leader. So in terms of virtual, let's talk about what that means in terms of driving virtually. So there's a lot of research on engagement, and I picked out the ones that were relatable to the virtual environment. So trust and integrity, huge. I'm talking to clients who are frustrated with their employer, or they're frustrated with their people that report to them, and trust is missing. It's often simple things like you're not communicating enough, you're not transparent, you're not caring about your team. All those things play into that. Once you lose it, it's really hard to get it back. Follow through in communication. Start focusing on those if you haven't already. Interesting and challenging work. Are you giving people still work to do, right? Are you hoarding it for yourself because you're so worried about what's going on, right? There's people out there on your team, check in with them, but they're probably open to trying out some more challenging work. Do they know what's going on in the organization and they understand the line of sight and what they're doing now is impacting that? So if I know, let's face it, we all don't know what our long-term goals are right now, generally in these organizations. Our vision, everything is changing. We don't know what it's going to be, but we probably know in 3 months' time where we want to be as an organization. And what's my role in that? What's the one small thing I do over here that can actually connect the dots for them to what it actually will achieve for the organization? Connection with coworkers, critical. So this is why we're hearing a lot of, and it's all over the news, and we are all on Zoom or WebEx calls or whatever it might be all the time, GoToMeeting, I've been on all the platforms. But having that connection is really critical, and that can be done successfully virtually. We'll talk about meetings and things in a couple of minutes. Employee development, are you developing them, your relationship with your manager? And a couple added ones from the world of research. So employee recognition, right? You're probably stressed out, everybody's stressed out. Where are the little wins? Where are the things that are working that you can recognize? Sometimes we forget under stress that we need to recognize and give positive feedback, individually or as teams. And caring goes so far in this sort of environment. Virtually, it has to be done, unless it's your natural way, it has to be very deliberate in terms of, I need to check in with my people, I need to see how they're doing. And it can be done virtually on the phone, it could be done even by text, for heaven's sakes. There's lots of ways you can do that. So let's talk about, in a virtual environment, some basics. Some basics are, you need to have the tools, you need to have the experience, I need to be able to do my job. I need to be able to be comfortable doing my job. Think about your team. Are there some people who are newer that don't know how to do it? Well, if they're not sure and they're still getting mentored or they're still learning, going to need an awful lot of support. With regard to people that are pretty good and you're like, oh, they can manage, don't forget about them either. They need to be checked in on as well. You've got processes, procedures that, hey, some of you probably don't even have in place. How do you put them in place? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later and what they could be about. And also technology. We're all learning, let's face it. Every call I've been on, there's usually been a tech glitch of some sort. So we're all learning new technologies, whether the technology is around project management, is it document sharing, is it around what we're doing here today. So how does that look and what does that feel like? So those are some basics. I'm going to go a little deeper dive, though, into what you can really start thinking about. Team alignment, I speak about a lot. Team alignment are we rowing in the right direction? You can sort of see this is from the St. John's Regatta, if anybody I can notice the Smith-Stockley boat there. But are we going in the right direction? Where are we going? What does it look like? I mean, a lot of us don't know, but we know something. It's about meeting our client needs or whatever it might be. That's a focal point. What does it need to be? Where are we going? How are we working together? What's your role? What's my role? How do we complement each other to get something done? Do I understand my own role? Do I understand the policies and the procedures? Do I understand how it all fits into the bigger picture? That's how we're aligned. So we go in the right direction, the right way towards the right goal. One of the biggest problems I see these days is communication. And with virtual work, it has to be deliberate. You have to think about it. You have to plan it. With communication, I don't think there's anyone right now that is doing it super, super well, but they're trying. They're trying really hard, and I think employees appreciate that. One of my executive coaching clients was going to do a town hall. And so I said, so how are you going to know you're successful, or how are you going to know what they're actually thinking? So what they ended up doing was some polls. So they did a poll at the beginning, the mid, and the end. They had questions that could be posed, all those things about how do you actually know that it's being received the right way? How do you get that information as quickly as possible? Because we know that the single biggest problem is that we think it's actually happened, the illusion that it's taken place. Are we doing two-way communication? Are we clear in our communication? Are you sure? And I'll say that because oftentimes we think we are, but we're not. Do we validate that it's actually been received? Are we doing it frequently enough? You may not know everything. We don't know what's going to happen in 3 months. We're not sure if we're going to have layoffs. That's okay. But you can tell them when you're going to know. Whatever I know, I will let you know. And the next time you're going to be notified of any information will be immediate if it's important, or otherwise we're going to have another, like maybe the executive is going to come out and give an email or something, or a presentation every couple of weeks. Whatever it is, people need to know when's the next time they're going to be updated, and it's clear around what's happening. Because what happens when you don't have communication, or there isn't frequent or clear enough communication? We make up stories in our head. And when we do that, it creates fear, it creates rumors, and your engagement levels are going to go down. And in an environment where productivity is tough already, it's going to get even worse. So communicate, communicate, communicate. So I have to laugh over this one because I'm an extrovert. I don't know if you can tell already, but I'm somebody that likes people. I love talking to people. So I miss people. So it's interesting though. I was talking to a leader, you have to laugh. I knew a leader early into the COVID situation, and I said to her, how are you making out with this quarantine sort of piece? And she said, she laughed and she said, Heather, really, what do you think? And I started to laugh, and I thought, oh my gosh, you're loving it. She's highly introverted. She's top of the house leader in this organization, but she was like, I'm loving this. But she said, but I recognize that my team isn't all loving it. Right? So some of us are going to like it more than others. Some of us will need the connection more than others. So really understand that. Understand the challenges that people are having. People are anxious in one way, shape, or form. They're either overworked, underworked, worried about the future. So how do you connect them? How do you stay connected to them? It's really significant. And as I'm kind of predicting, is that it's not going to be back to any sense of norm of what we're used to for a while. So work is now at home. So how can home now be part of work? How do we make it normal? How do we not judge others if their kid comes over, or they have to go attend to their mother they're taking care of, or whatever it might be? So connecting, making sure you're having those sessions individually and as a team. Technology. Okay, so determine the tools available. I'm not a tech person by any way, shape, or form, which is why I love having John and Justin on the back end of this, especially John. But understanding what's available. A lot of employers now are bringing in new tools. So figure out what they are. Can you get a super user who can actually train people and be supportive? Because some people just are not great at technology. When to use them. So if you think about communications as an example, especially with virtually working, what's the best form to communicate? So if we've got people who are worried and really upset about things, am I going to send them an email? Is it something whereby I've got a really important message that's going to be brought out and I need to have interaction? Then yeah, you're going to do a virtual meeting. I've seen some challenges where people are sending emails out with very big messaging that is causing panic and stress with people. So figure out the tool. Is texting the right thing? Is messaging the right thing? Is email the right thing? Or should you really have that one-on-one one-on-one or team conversation via virtual means, because sometimes you just need to see their faces and you need to make sure that there's interaction and dialogue. So set the ground rules around technology, right? So what does it mean when we set through our technology? As a brand, as an organization, how are we going to show up in our technology? What does it look like with clients? Testing it out, making sure we're familiar with it. No talking, you talk over of others. Like, how do we set up these rules, ground rules around technology? And also recognizing that there are different styles. So for example, when I'm facilitating a smaller group and I'm doing a session virtually, we'll have the chat going, we'll have, because some of the introverts aren't comfortable speaking out in the larger group. So I'll monitor the chat, I'll check this out, I'll check that out, making sure I'll ask questions specifically to people and just try to draw them out as an example. So how do you use technology for that? Can they ask a question on the back end? And providing feedback to the tech people as much as to your colleagues and how they're doing with technology. So meetings, I wish I should have done a poll. For time, I didn't do too many polls on meetings and how many people love meetings. So the bane of many leaders' existence is meetings and how over meetinged we are. So what do we do about meetings? Meetings are essential when you're virtually working. There's not an option. It's not just we're going to get everyone together in the boardroom. It's a sense of connection. People need to have that. And if people are doing more virtual working, then we need to have a simple bit of social or a connection at the beginning of most of those meetings. Say it's a weekly meeting, what can that be? Not everybody loves the social and the personal piece, so be careful. Some people find it really awkward and uncomfortable for them to talk about personal situations or what's going on at home, so be careful with it, but have the opportunity for people to have a few minutes. Visuals, for heaven's sakes, have visuals or visual learners out there. It could be a picture that you can talk about, or it could be a quote from a client or whatever it might be. And use technology functions. So if you're having a meeting, for example, I take advantage of lots of the different, like the polling for sure, if it's a larger meeting, the chat function, the whiteboard. It's no different than having your whiteboard in your office. How do you have a whiteboard? How do you actually do breakout sessions? I do them quite often now using different platforms, and you can send off people in all directions, and the energy when they come back and the laughing and the joking sometimes is incredible to see, and the creativity as well as the connection people can create from breakout groups. So if you haven't used them, try it with your technology. But have roles as well. If you're the leader and you're chairing the meeting, then by all means, share around the load. Do you have to be the tech person, or can you be like me and have a John and Justin on your team? How can you spread it out? Can someone be in charge of one element so you can actually listen as the leader, or you can be the person to step up if you're better at one function? Ask questions and listen. The biggest advice for any leader, period, virtually or not, is listening and asking questions. If you're having a meeting, you should be talking least. If it's informational, you can send it in advance. How do people actually communicate is by listening, asking the questions to your team, getting them to collaborate, getting them to talk. And one of my favorite acronyms is sort of WAIT, why am I talking? Ask yourself that next time you're in a meeting if you're speaking too much. Because let's face it, you don't want people falling asleep. So I hope none of you are falling asleep there today. Okay. One-on-one meetings, those are going by the wayside right now, I'm noticing. So when I've said, people have their team meetings, but are you having the check-in one-on-ones, right? Because they're so critical. Not everyone's going to speak up at a meeting. If someone's struggling, they're not necessarily going to speak up. So make sure you have those one-on-ones. We'll talk more about accountability now in a couple of minutes as we go through these next few slides. So delegating, are you delegating? So think about yourself. If I'm someone who likes to be in control, or am I actually delegating work? You should still be delegating work. And not just to the one person that's the superstar, okay? So what needs to be accomplished, why it's actually important, don't ever miss that one. How it's connected to a bigger picture so they can see why it's important and they're going to push hard to get it done. And who it's specifically impacting in case something does get delayed, they can keep communications open. People can't come into your office and ask the question. So you need to make sure that they know exactly how success is being tracked, when it's due, and also what support's going to be available. Are you going to be available? I've had people say, look, I haven't heard from my boss. I've sent him emails. I haven't heard a thing. So now I'm just kind of on hold. And how is that for productivity? So how do you know who maybe needs a little more help, who's a little less skilled? How can you support them, or how can a colleague of theirs support them? Okay. Ground rules. I set these up a lot with teams and team sessions. They can be on anything procedural all the way up to how we work as a team. A couple of quick ones that can really help from a virtual perspective. Communication. So what are we communicating? How are we doing it? Not everyone agrees with how we communicate. So there have been teams with issues, right? So who's communicating? How are they communicating? Does that make sense? And you really need to sort that out as a team, and you can figure this out as a team, which is how I often promote it. And I can hear John in the background there. I'm not sure if he needs to be on the call. Decision-making governance. So who makes decisions? What does that look like? And giving feedback to each other. What does that look like? How do we promote that? You can't just pop in and say, can I, give you some feedback on the meeting yesterday, right? How does that look in a virtual space? And how do you resolve conflicts? I'm having a lot of calls around that virtually. So how do we do this? How does it work? It's very awkward to do this virtually. So talk about it as a team and confirm understanding that everyone knows what this looks like. Everyone's uniquely different. You as a leader need to adapt to the needs of those people, okay? So as much as you might have these ground rules, you're going to have unique needs by each of your team. And guess what? As a leader, your job is to support them. Last couple of slides, apologize, I'm always running over time, is when I was asked years ago by many clients around, before COVID, I guess I should put it, around how do we actually manage this? How do we have accountability, right, when you're working from home? So then my question to them was, well, how do you do it now? So if you're working from home, you need to have a sense of what you need to do. So if you're telling me what I need to do, when I need to have it done by, who can support me, how I can contact you if I need some help, and then you can check in, or I can send you an update, on how it's going. Why do we need to be at work 9 to 5? Can I do the work at 2 o'clock in the morning? Can I do some of it on the weekend? Does it need to be that sort of environment? So from a virtual perspective, you can look at a results-oriented work environment. So if you're not set up this way, how could it be? How can you look at it as, if I know I need A, B, and C done, does it matter exactly when it's done? Can it be a flexible environment where people are available for meetings certain times of the day, but hey, maybe they can do that from home? In the world of COVID, the best work might be at 10 o'clock at night when the kids are gone to bed, right? So how do we have it results-oriented versus stuck in a structure of time and place? Okay, so just think about that. So if you're thinking about virtual work, one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give is how to set goals, okay? So most of you might have heard of SMART goals. If not, you can look them up. I'm going to promote something a little different called FAST goals. FAST goals are a little bit more shorter time period. It's frequently discussed. You talk about, it could be my goals for the week, it could be my goals for the month, it could be my goal for a specific project. It's got to be a little bit of a push, right? Whether it's for timeline push or whatever type of a push it is. Be careful with ambitious though, because ambitious now might be very different than it was before COVID, right? COVID throws a lot of complexity into things. So just remember that if you're promoting a certain goal to one of your team members, be very specific and transparent. I should know what your goal is, and you should know what mine is. If I'm a team member of yours, you should know what I'm working on, because, hey, that's going to impact probably what I'm doing and I'm working on with you. So being very transparent about that. If you haven't looked at it, think about it. And strategically as an organization, ROW may not work perfectly and ideally, but how could it work? Are we actually results-oriented, and are we supporting people to be that way? Because if you are, virtual work can be much more significantly done. And those are agreed upon goals, by the way, as well. Lastly, self-care. So a lot of leaders I've been working with since COVID started, and teams are struggling with their own sense of anxiety and stress. And sometimes we don't even know we're in it. It's called a fight or flight response. This is my coaching side coming out. So our body reacts in different ways, and sometimes we've been in a hyper state of fight or flight response. We're stressed, we don't know what's happening, and a lot of us are just finding we're exhausted. So you cannot take care of your team unless you take care of yourself. Understand what that means. Notice when you're being a little bit edgy or a little stressed, or what I call triggered, right? Notice that, recognize that when you're that way, you're not going to be that remarkable leader. The remarkable leader needs to take care of themselves first. And that's how, that's my world with a lot of clients these days, is how they actually can get through their day to be able to have the energy to support their team. because many of us are working leaders. We're not necessarily just taking care of our team. So a lot of information, looking forward to the Q&A. So how do you make yourself a remarkable leader? This is the time in crisis is when we can step up and be the best that we can be. We're going to make mistakes, but what's one thing maybe you could think about doing a little better as an organization, as a leader? What can you control? So what's in my role that I can do to achieve that? And what's your first step? It can be overwhelming, like goal setting theory, one step at a time. What's one small thing you could do in a meeting, connecting with an employee that can make a difference? And it can all be done virtually. All right, thanks for listening to me go on for 20 odd minutes. So I'm going to throw it over to Justin there now, and I'll shut my screen off. And I'm looking forward to these questions. I hope they're good, folks.
Thank you very much, Heather. And thank you, everybody, for the questions you've submitted so far. I'll just remind you that to submit questions, please use the Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen. You may need to hit the little arrow next to the Q&A letters to drop it down, be able to type it in. I'll also remind people to be careful, like if you intend to ask something that is private, where your name doesn't show up, be sure to do that to me. Otherwise, everyone will see your question. Just reminding that. So Heather, I'll go right into the first couple. I just want to thank you. What you shared was fantastic, and in a very
personable,
digestible way. So
good.
Great job.
Feedback. It can be done.
Yeah. One of our participants was looking for suggestions on how to manage accountability for work being done from home, for example, staff supervision.
Right. So if you sort of go back to what I mentioned around ROW or result-oriented, one of the key things about virtual work is setting up an agreement with your team or your team members. So what is it that they are expected to do? Are there times where they need to be available? In the spirit of COVID, though, too, you have to remember that life happens, right? Be respectful of their situation, who they're taking care of in their home, all those sorts of pieces. But my couple of quick things would be, set up times where they really need to be available as best as they can for meetings, whether it's client meetings, etc. Keeping up to date, it won't take long to figure out if people are keeping you up to date. So it could be an email, and every leader has their different level of what they need for control. I'm kind of one of those, let's just throw it out there and see what they come back with, and I'll work with them on it. Some people like to be a little more rigid. So you have to think about yourself, because if you're delegating work and the person, you can't see them doing it, you can't just pop by their desk, what makes you comfortable as a leader? So it could be, can you send me a draft or whatever you got done by Wednesday? Or it could be, every Friday, send me a note on all the things you've accomplished. Another one that's really good is, I don't know if you've seen RACI charts. It could be just here's the project I'm working on, and here's where I am, and here's the current status that it's in. It could be just one of those every Friday, as an example. In terms of objectives, you have to set objectives. So you set the larger picture objectives, you set the shorter ones. So what's the weekly ones? And over time, it will become more comfortable and normal for people. And then once we're all unique as leaders in terms of how we hold people accountable and the need for controlling that environment. So be true to yourself, but push yourself a little bit, because you got to give them a little trust and a little faith and try it out, and then see how it comes back to you. So just a few little tips that, again, in person or not, just set those agreements up, and you can actually have them written up, and here's how we agree to work together. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. We had someone ask, did you have any comment or statistics that you could share specifically on nonprofits?
Ooh, I'm actually working a lot these days in nonprofit space. If I win the lottery, I do it all the time for free. It's an amazing organizations that are working out there. So statistics around, sorry, what was that again, Justin? Statistics around what specifically?
Nonprofits. It was more of a general. Like, did you? Okay. Yep.
No, I can honestly say, though, it depends on the type of nonprofit, first of all. So some of the nonprofits I'm working with now are around the comfort level with talking about objectives and performance, because it's often not checked. So first of all that would be one recommendation I'd give. In terms of engagement, working virtually is often pretty common in some of the nonprofits, and they do it quite well, but they have very structured projects and programs. This is often programming that you're delivering to participants, as an example, or it's fundraising. And even now I'm on boards of nonprofits and just having virtual meetings and things. I don't think it really changes too much, except for the fact that you have to have the conversations around objectives. You have to have the conversations around performance and accountability. And one thing we don't do in any industry well is feedback. So if you want to be successful in a virtual environment, you have to give the positive and constructive feedback. And in the nonprofit space, I find a little bit reluctant sometimes in the profit space to give that constructive feedback. Has to be done, and it has to be done equally. Some of you people on the call are like, oh, I love giving positive feedback. Believe it or not, there's probably half of the people on the call that are happy just giving the constructive feedback. How do you balance that out? And in a nonprofit, that's the one thing I'd say I'd note. I can't give you the stats on it, but it's definitely a little less comfortable in that space. So that would be a big piece of advice I'd give for virtually. How do you do it, and how do you be comfortable with it? And ask for it back.
Right. The questions are flooding in. I'll go straight on to the next one. I have someone who is wondering what advice you have for junior leadership in a large organization to help bridge the gap between the workforce and upper management working remotely at this time.
Oh wow. There's a $1 million question. I'll give you a little. I have a coaching client of mine who's a junior leader. She's phenomenal, and she was struggling. Just to give you a little story, she was struggling with not feeling engaged with the team. The leader wasn't stepping up. It was a senior leader, okay, very senior leader, stepping up, and technical environment. So people were kind of off in their own space and kind of doing their own thing. And sometimes it's a matter of offering to support things. So as an example, she came up with some ideas in coaching. I'm not throwing out ideas. They're coming up with themselves. She's so smart. She came up with, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to just offer to, have some team meetings. And I'm great with technology, so I'm going to do this. Sometimes offering suggestions to support. The senior leaders right now are struggling just as much. One of the things as a junior leader I say to people is the problems that you're having right now and the struggles you're having are really not that different from the executive. I work with executives on everything that I work on with junior leaders. It's just sometimes they recognize, yeah, they've been struggling with it for a while. You just might be learning to struggle with it. So it's all suggestions, offer suggestions, try to help, reach out, give feedback as best you can. It's hard to give feedback up. Maybe give it through HR if you can, around some support you need. They're trying. When in doubt, assume they're doing the best they can. So how can you offer support to kind of be an adjunct or a support to them as well? And some leaders are better than others. Some executives or senior leaders are thriving, as I said before, and some of them are not so much. So, and connecting with them and asking how you can support them could be another step forward. It's hard, especially if you're in a big organization as a junior leader, but this is a time to step up. You can be an extraordinary leader at the supervisor level just as much as you can be at the top. And, I'm just throwing out to the females out there, if you're a female leader, make sure you tell people what you're doing. Make sure you're reaching out, because often female leaders don't do it as much. So it's a little start, a little step, a little hint, hopefully, that'll help.
Wonderful. We had a couple of questions that have come up wondering if they'll have access to the presentation. I'd like to let everybody know that this presentation is being recorded and it will be shared with everyone who registered, even if they weren't able to attend today. So you'll have access to, you'll be able to pause, read the slides, whatever you might like. So just so everybody knows. Okay, next question. Any tips for managing up for middle management, how to get better virtual leadership from senior leadership?
Oh my, tough ones you're giving me today.
I promise they're in the order they came in.
I was going to say they can listen to my presentation, but the virtual is tough for a lot of people. People are uncomfortable with it. When I'm dating myself because I'm turning 50 this year. But when I first started out in my career, I was savvy with technology. You'd laugh if I told you what it was, because you wouldn't even understand the type of technology and the DOS and everything we had years ago. But having said that, sometimes it's a matter of being that support for them, offering suggestions. I call it reverse mentoring, or you see it in the research around reverse mentoring. So how can you mentor them? The question is how. How do you get the information to them in a way that makes sense? So, offering yourself as a support to the virtual platform. The hardest thing I find with leaders now with the virtual sort of environment is the technology. So if, for example, like I'm sitting here right now and I didn't have to worry at all today. I've got, John, God love him in the back end, who's doing all that. So that's what stresses me out the most, to tell you the truth, with all the technology, how to do it. So example, we're having a big team meeting and we're going to do breakout groups and we're going to do a whiteboard and we're going to do all these different elements that you can do from a technology perspective. I can guarantee of all the executives, hundreds or maybe 1,000 executives that I've met over the years, very few of them would be comfortable in that space. So how do you take control of that? How do you offer to be a support for them with our whiteboard, or I can do the breakouts for you, or I can take the notes, or those sorts of pieces? That right now, from all the executives I've talked to since it started, it's the part that scares them the most. It's not around connecting and being a leader and talking to people. It's around how to do it in a way that the technology is comfortable. Video. Some very quiet, introverted leaders find the video kind of stressful, right? Having the video up in the privacy of their home. So again, respect it, but how can you support it? I know it's a little bit repetitive from what I said before, but that's probably, I think, the biggest challenge for them in the virtual space. And they also don't know how much their organization is going to be using virtual. Are they hoping it's going to go back to the way it was, right? To the previous norm? My argument is it never will. I don't think it ever will. I think the future will be at least partially virtual, whether it's we're all week virtual or if it's 2 days, 3 days a week virtual. It's going to be a new world, and some of them may be a little slower to pull themselves to that conclusion. So offer. That's all I can say. And I'm happy to take the help.
Thank you. With respect to the platforms that you've used, what are your thoughts on what are the better platforms?
Okay. Well, everyone's probably using these days WebEx, Teams, Zoom. There's also GoToMeeting. So I've used all of the above. Zoom is becoming an adjective and a verb and a noun, whatever. I mean, it's every word. There's different platforms for different uses. I personally am finding Zoom great for breakouts. It's simple for people like me that are not tech savvy. GoToMeeting is another one that I've used quite a lot with clients. A lot of my clients have that one. WebEx is good. It just, its functionality depends on what you're looking for. I love the annotation tools where people can get up and put check marks and funnel things on the screens. The whiteboarding capability and the breakout groups I find are the most interactive from a virtual perspective. I think it really comes down to your back end as well. Like if you're in a large organization, where does your IT see it in terms of, because of course there's security pieces, how does it fit? Some clients of mine, like I have a Zoom account, but so I've got a Zoom account myself, and I've got clients who just use WebEx. So they're the ones that invite me to their meetings, and I use their platform. So from a technology standpoint, but from a user standpoint, either way, get the experts, get the Johns, who can be the super users, right? And if you're looking to make an impact and be supportive on a team, how can you become that super user of whatever platform you're using?
Fantastic. Scrolling up. We have a participant who's looking for suggestions for doing polls using feedback, and what should they keep in mind?
Ooh. Polls are great because you can do a snap, like a quick down and dirty. What would be advice on polls? I think polls are great because you can come up with some pre-established parameters. I think the key is to have one little suggestion. We have other, whether people can put it in there or not. If they can't write it in, which most cases you can't, you just click the box. But you can notice if there's something outside of what you think it might be. For example, if you're doing a town hall and the CEO or CAO or executive director is doing a session, then you want to have it so, how are you finding this? Is this supportive to you? I think the key is picking options of things that you might be challenging. Focus in on things. For example, if you do a general poll to start, say the next town hall you do, you can be more focused. So this is what we're hearing. You also want to make sure people know how to confidentially send feedback as well. It could be through their HR department. There could be a technology way that you can do that. It could be, I mean, you can't just do this virtually, but how do you slip a note under the door kind of concept? So diving down, and if you find, and be open too. Here's what we got from the last poll, right? We are struggling as an organization. Be authentic. We are struggling as an organization in the following ways, and we've heard you. We're looking for your advice, right? So please send any suggestions you can to this email or call phones or whatever the heck it is. And then keep commenting on it and then digging into that even deeper the next time you have a town hall or you have a session of some sort. How are we doing, right? That was an issue before. We've implemented, how's that going, and having a little list of things that people can choose from. So the big thing is not to have just the same stuff over and over. You can have one question, like a standard one around your level of engagement or something like that, but generally try to dig into the issues and get their advice on how to fix it. They're the best people to ask. Executives, especially if you're at the top, it's only one view, and most people are not comfortable giving feedback to the executive. So find a way for people to do that.
Great answer. What strategies do you recommend for motivating your team or motivating one team member who is usually negative or lethargic?
So some people are more critically minded. Boy, we could talk for a while on this one, but I won't. I'll give a very sort of short little answer on this one. But some people are critically minded and don't just always recognize that we need that, okay? So there's the variation I told my husband, because oftentimes, my kids will always say, oh, Heather, Mommy, your glass is half full and Daddy's is half empty, right? So, but we partner really well because, if we're all glasses half full, things aren't going to work very well. It's around, and this is how I explained it years ago to a team that seemed to resonate, was it's about how often you're negative. So when I work with clients, like coaching clients who are, everyone sees me as so negative and they say I'm negative. I'm just a realist, right? So then we talk about, so how often is a comment would be received more positive or not as positive? And it's just the frequency. Sometimes giving the feedback around, look, you give a lot of great critical comments. And sometimes the critical comments, there's a lot of them. It'd be really great if you could throw in some feedback or support of someone else's view, right? Giving feedback to these people, they will see themselves as doing the best they can. They're giving everything they've got, and that's the way they do it. But they need to just understand that it's the volume of it. It's not the fact that they're critical, it's the volume of it that makes the difference. And this is where you have to step up as a leader and give them the feedback. So it could be, so in the meeting yesterday, you made, 10 comments, which was great. 10 of them, though, were a little on the critical side. I'd love it if you could throw in some positive, or if Mary over there had a great comment, offer support on her recommendation. So again, it's not saying that they're just negative. You never want to, but that's a person. It's around when you gave those comments yesterday. The impact was, I think it brought the team down a little bit, or it makes people wonder if you see some positivity in how we're moving forward. Maybe next time you could do the following. So just a little tip there is that when I talk to people like that, they're like, I'm putting the elephants out on the table all the time, and that's my job because no one else is doing it. So again, they're doing the best they can. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, wonderful. We got a question here. You mentioned share tips for leaders to take care of themselves so they're able to take care of their teams. What are some of your suggestions with respect to this?
Oh, wow. That's a whole session in itself. Everyone's uniquely different. I think the key is really understanding your own emotions. So the biggest advice I can give as a leader is to recognize when you're stressed, when you're not yourself, when you're being triggered. So when someone's saying something, you're being a little edgy or things like that. The recognition is everything, because when you're in that space, you can't perform as a leader appropriately. So number one, notice. Notice when you're not yourself, you're a little edgy, you can't relax. So that's tip number one. And then most of the time when you don't interact as much with your team, take a breath. And everyone's uniquely different on how to do from a self-care perspective. These days, I'm finding a lot of the leaders that I'm working with are doing everything, obviously physical activity, meditation, just getting out of your environment, have a space in your house where you can hide from your kids and your dog, right? So self-care is very unique, but I think the key is you need to know when you need to do it. Okay, so I can't do this. Like, say, for example, you have a meeting on Friday afternoon and you're just not there. And if you can move the meeting, right? You don't want to show up in a negative way, especially these days. And I don't mean a negative way because, of course, I don't want to get into the negative comment again. But again, how do you show up in a way that you're open and you're listening? If it happens in a meeting, for example, and you start going down a path in your mind and the stress of the week just really kicks in, step back from it in terms of mentally step back, listen to others. You can ask a question. You can say, I've just got to step out for a minute and take a breath. Breathing exercises are really critical. I've taught lots of executives how to do breathing exercises. So if you go online, look at yoga breathing, relaxation breathing, makes a huge difference. Self-care is so unique. Just remember when you need it and then figure out ways you can do it in your crazy world. And everyone does everything from yoga to meditation to playing with their kids. So just do whatever you need to do, and be honest with your team. I'm not myself today. I'm feeling on edge today, and that authenticity, believe it or not, will be seen as a remarkable leader. That is what leaders do. They're caring, but they're open and they're authentic. So don't be, but just don't react out of emotion. That's the key. So if you find you're on edge, step back.
Mm-hmm. And it's a great leadership skill to be able to show, like, I'm dealing with this and it's a challenge, like we all need to, and let's do it together, get through it together.
Exactly. And that's what I'm seeing people are resonating with. Exactly, Dustin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to read 3 more questions. 2 more questions. I'll do 2 more, and that'll take us to 2 o'clock. Sure. I'm going to share the questions with Heather. There's a number of them, so I'm sure she'll pick out the ones that kind of maybe she didn't cover in her presentation or that she'd like to answer, and I'll share those with all of the audience when we share the recording. So if you didn't get your question answered, know that it will be shared, and we'll do a couple more and then we'll close. Mm-hmm. Any suggestions for better work life with respect to separating work life from home life? Some work from home staff find the imposed work from home objectives intrusive on their home life and are having issues with separating the two.
Oh, that's a huge one. There are lots of, there's lots of tips I can give around that. Not everyone has a dedicated workspace. In an ideal world, you have a dedicated workspace. I think the key here too is to remember, for some people anyway, this is working at home during a crisis, right? So it's not natural working. Like, for example, I have 2 kids who are normally at school, and I have a dog who's only 14 months and she's got lots of energy. Who couldn't go to doggy daycare. Sounds silly, but made a big difference when I'm trying to do my coaching calls with my clients. So I have a dedicated workspace, but my world now, even when I was working from home before, is very different. So first of all, be kind to yourself, recognize you're not going to be as productive. You aren't. The stress, the anxiety of the world around us is causing everyone to be less productive. So number 1, don't be hard on yourself. Number 2, workspace is really tough. I think one of the biggest things, simple things actually, to make sure you have is ergonomically correct. A lot of people have taken their stuff from work. I've had people who've got permission to go back into their office so they can get delivered their chair. I have a stand-up desk as an example, like just you put on my desk and it just, it stands up. Mm-hmm. So number 1, make sure that it's ergonomically correct. That's huge. If you're standing, if you're sitting, whatever you're used to doing, because it can take a toll. And secondly, try to find a space. The other thing is too, when in the day are you working, right? When is your prime time to work? If it's during COVID and you've got people around the house, when maybe it's not during your regular time. Maybe you have to do some of your work in the evening. So a lot of people use noise canceling, get expensive, I do, noise canceling headphones. A lot of people really enjoy those. Other people just find a place, sometimes it's in the kitchen area, which is really hard. Is there another place you can work? Be creative about how you work. If you're reading a document, can you go off to another room, not by your computer if it's printed? Or, are there ways that you can separate yourself that way? So ergonomically, some people work better with music or without. So noise canceling headphones. Trying to think of anything else that I've seen clients do. The hard part now with COVID is meetings and things, right? Because you can't dictate around your family. So, but be open about that. Look, I'm going to have the kids, if they come in, I'm sorry. Right? So if and when, though, you become more working from home virtual, like that's what you're going to be doing is working from home 2 or 3 times a week, you have to have a dedicated space. And there has to be almost ground rules for your family if they're old enough, if your kids are old enough. Otherwise, hopefully they're at daycare or at school.
Yeah.
So
I'm laughing because one of my techniques is even if I'm not in a meeting, I have to have the earbuds in with either some chill, relaxed music, whatever, everyone has different tastes, to help reduce me hearing the sounds in the home and turning off like my dad brain from what the kids' needs might be if I'm having to focus. Like it's little things like that will help it be more of a smooth day, at least from my experience.
And again, don't get self-critical about it, right? Like, oh, sorry, John, I just missed that because the kid was screaming over there. I mean, this is where, and that won't be the norm. If virtual working becomes the norm, hopefully that you can work around that. So if you're working from home and the kids come home at 3, you do the majority of your work before 3.
Yeah. And it would also feel pretty foreign to do a full work day and not have an interruption. Like I've mentioned to my children, like you can always knock on the door to the basement and say, Dad, can I come in? Just like people do in an office.
That's right.
Right?
They're old enough to understand that. People with 2-year-olds, it's a little harder,
It's different. Yeah, totally. I'll go with one more. What is the biggest, in the experience of some of your work, what's the biggest mental hurdle that people seem to be facing switching to virtual?
The people. Connecting with the people, leadership-wise, feeling confident the work's going to get done. So it's a stress mentally around not knowing it's going to get done. I'd say that hands down is the biggest one. Not connecting, not feeling confident in the work. And it's a very basic principle of why we work. We work to execute projects, to work with clients. Not having confidence in that is causing an incredible amount of stress and frustration with leaders that I'm talking to. And not having the confidence that their teams also want to come back to work. There's another one. There's a lot of people stressing around, I'm getting pushback on people coming back to work. They feel stressed out. And that mental stress from the leader, but also mental stress from the employees who are often leaders themselves around not feeling comfortable coming back to work. That's a whole other can of worms, shall we say, that I'm working with clients on around how do you make it comfortable for them? Because if you want to engage them and get the most out of them, you have to give them some time to work into this new change. Not everybody can switch on a dime. And everyone has stressful situations. Like I'm on a medication that suppresses my immunity, which is true. So for me going into a workspace right now, it would be very stressful right now for me. So just recognizing people have people at home, they have kids, they have all these things going on, mentally, I guess appreciating other people's situations would probably be the most challenging thing I see.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll finish here, but I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who joined online. We had over 300 people with us for the majority of it, which was fantastic. A big thanks to Ms. Peters and for all that you shared today. Thank you as well to the Gardner Center and the Conference and Event Services team at Memorial's Emera Innovation Exchange. Go John. The Alumni Engagement Team is working hard to help alumni stay connected and provide the kind of engagement opportunities our alumni want most. So please use the audience poll that will come up in a moment and let us know your thoughts about the event today, but also other ideas that you'd like us to consider. Our next leadership webinar is 1 week from today on Wednesday, June 10th at 1 p.m. Newfoundland Standard Time with Lyle Wetch, entitled Communicating with Digital and Social Media Tools. We hope to see you there. Take care. Best wishes, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.